Alright guys, here is our anatomy physiology revealed and practice atlas video for our exercise 6, which is the overview of the skeleton. There's not an all-encompassing module for this. You just have to go to skeletal. Same thing in the practice atlas. It's just the skeletal system. And it doesn't have absolutely everything. Like, it doesn't have the structures of the long bone, but the good news is the structures of the long bone is pretty well laid out in your lab manual for you and on the PowerPoint. But we can just take a nice little look here at our entire skeleton and see that it is arranged into your axial skeleton, which is the skeletal features in the middle of the body, your head, your backbone, your ribs. Basically, that's what is there. And then your appendicular skeleton is all of your limbs. If we're looking at something like a long bone, a fantastic example is like your femur. If we were trying to look at a more sesamoid bone, we would look at our patella. If we were trying to find a flat bone, a great example are the bones that are found in your skull. We can look at just the skull in a few minutes and see exactly the bones we're looking at there. If we were trying to look at a short bone, we would want to look at things like our carpals, which may not be listed on this full skeleton, but we can see some metacarpals, and then right above or below, depending on how you want to look at it, more proximally is your carpals. Oh, nope, just kidding. I can look at them. There's your carpals. Those are going to be your short bones. And then things that are like the irregular shaped bones, that's going to be things that are in your vertebrae. And we can turn our skeleton around and take a look at our vertebrae. So those are our irregular shapes. If we're looking at the different features of bones, it is nice to look at things like our femur again. We can see here that that's the head part. This little knobby rough bit here is a trochanter. The neck is this then sort of pinched in narrow section. You can't see it on just this view, but there's a line, which is a narrow ridge. You can see these condyles, which are smooth, rounded places where there will be joints. If we look at our pelvis, we can see fossa. That's this indented depression surface. If we look at things like our leg bone, our tibia, you could find things like tubercles on them. And that's just another small rounded area. And we might find a tuberosity, which is a bumpy, rough region. Again, not easily seen on this little skeletal model, but does exist. If we go and just look at the skull, again, we can see a great example of a flat bone, something like your parietal bone or even your frontal bone. Those are flat bones. We can also see sinuses. Those are these openings that have this open chamber in the bone, and they're actually underneath this as well. We can see foramen, which are these round holes that are really for nerves and blood vessels to pass through. We can see processes, which, if we are to look here, there's this process, it's this projection. We might also see fissures, which are these long, narrow gaps, or meatus or canals, which are round tunnels, and they are bigger than a foramen. If we then sort of switch gears off of this anatomy physiology revealed, I guess before we do that, some other cool things. Here's your 3D model of different parts and pieces. Um, this is going to take a minute to load, of course, because I want it to load quickly. Um, all right, I'll pause what we're doing on our video so that it doesn't waste your time. All right, perfect. We're back. It loaded. This is showing you, you can click and it will give you a much more in-depth what skeletal, nervous, cardiovascular, and muscular systems, where they all interact on the skull. If you click here, there are animations that you can watch of the different joint movements. There is, of course, histology. And we looked at these before when we were looking at the histology lab. So you can go back and, find the osteons, find the perforating canals, that sort of thing. There's this really cool one, which is the different images that you could take, like if you were a doctor. So there's like bone scan, and you can find what it looks like in a bone scan, or um, looking at an x-ray of the cervical region. So that's pretty cool. And then this button allows you to quiz yourself should you want to quiz yourself. If we then flip over to our practice atlas, which you can find in your McGraw-Hill book, you'll see the models that we have in our lab. So you just go to study the skeletal system, and you can start with the histology. It is starting with the long bone section. So this is the model that is in your lab as well. So it's showing you your periosteum here. Here's compact bone tissue. It will show you the entire osteons, the endosteum. That is just going to cover the inside part here, showing you the spongy bone, trabeculae, specifically the trabeculae, and where you find the bone marrow. If we then go to the second cross section, it has a couple more parts and pieces for you. It's zoomed in a little bit so you can see the periosteum. Here is where you find your compact bone tissue, individual osteons, endosteum tissue, spongy bone, that trabeculae, and bone marrow. Again, we can find perforating fibers holding the tissue onto the bone, perforating canals, where we can, of course, have our blood vessels and veins running, the lamellae, which is all over the place, but you can really just see where they're pointing to them here. But any of these little open spaces also count. And then the central canals. If you keep going down, it's going to show you your individual osteocytes. That's the cell inside the lacunae space, and the little tiny looking arms like little ants. Those little tiny lines are the caniculi. We can also look at an internal view. Here's our more internal view. Again, you can see the lacunae, that little space. The osteocytes are the cells that are in that space. This is your spongy bone tissue. These little archways are your trabeculae. This other substance in it is the bone marrow, and showing you the endosteum tissue. If we look at a cross section, here we are showing you the picture of it versus the model that is in your book. The periosteum, it's not shown in this microscope slide image. Compact bone is all of this stuff. The endosteum and spongy bone. So hopefully between the images in your manual, the PowerPoint, and exploring this, you feel good about the information that you are going to be required to know. There are other parts here that will be more useful as we move on to the appendicular and axial skeleton components, but you are welcome to still click through them here. But of course, if you have any questions as you're going through anything, please feel free to ask. But thanks for watching this video, and have a great rest of your day.